Hi guys, welcome. I'm going to give you guys just a moment to begin to share this live out, but I want to first thank you for those who joined tonight, those who will join tonight, and those who will even watch the replay for joining us at the Move Roundtable. I'm super excited about tonight because I have an amazing guest, and I cannot wait to bring him to the stage because I know that he's going to drop so many good gems on our topic tonight. So while I'm waiting, and while we're preparing, I want you to go ahead and begin to share this live, share it with your family, friends, cousins, aunties, uncles, all of the above. Go ahead and begin to share it so that we can go ahead and get into this conversation. I'm going to give it like a cool 30 more seconds, and then I'm going to introduce them, bring them to the stage, and we're going to start the run of the show today. But please go ahead and begin to share, and thank you for those who are coming in. Welcome. And we're almost there. We're sharing and sharing away. So we're almost there. Well, I just want to go ahead and get started then. Welcome everyone and thank you for being here. At the Move Collective, we believe that most people don't actually have a strategy problem, they have an alignment problem. And misalignment shows up in ways that we've learned to normalize. So in our leaderships, in our teams, in ourselves, we often have made it normal just for us to operate in the fact that I've been here for 35 years at this job, or I'm called to be in leadership and this is who we are. But today's conversation is about getting underneath that and into a place of healing, alignment, and clarity. We need clarity in leadership. We need clarity to intersect while we're growing, building, and becoming. And I have just the person for that on today. This is not just a leave and listen session. So this recording is live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube. Make sure that you go back and replay it and listen to it if necessary. But this is the space that's going to be for reflection. It's going to be for awareness, and it's going to be for some realignment. So I'm excited about today because I get the pleasure to introduce, and it's actually, I'm going to say this again when I bring him on stage, but it's just kind of bittersweet because a couple of years ago, Dr. Carl and I hosted a cultural conversation, and it was absolutely amazing. So it is befitting, and I'm so excited to be able to have him here with me again today. Today, I'm joined by him, who is a transformation when it concerns how he shows up and talks about not just leadership and the awareness of it, but someone who talks about transformation. He's the founder of Increasing Life Chances for You, and he has some other things that are going on that I'm going to allow him to tell. He is a trauma-informed mental health counselor and life coach, background in behavioral health, leadership, sociology, and global work, advocate for mental health and culturally responsive care. What makes his perspective powerful and aligned tonight is what we stand for in his ability to connect personal healing with how we show up in leadership, relationships, and systems. I want to welcome to the stage none other than Dr. Carl himself. Hey, Dr. Carl, how are you doing?
Good evening, Janay. Let me
I,
say this is such a pleasure to be here because I don't know if I could say anything after following that.
hey, I
You're
mean,
let down.
I'm just excited to have you here because I know that it'll be an informed conversation. And I just want to open up this space to you because we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about leadership alignment, the systems we use on a daily basis, but also the healing that we may actually have to do as well. So I'm excited to be here. And I want to just jump into our first prompt. Before we do that, though, I do want you to give a little more background on who you are, what you are about, and what you're actually pushing into.
Oh man, how can I build on what you just said? Um, well, probably the one new thing is I can add to that is that I've written now three, soon to be four published works that really, if there's a through line. Uh, through what we're going to be discussing today and talking about alignment and transformation and growing into your truth and who you are and embracing your experiences in this world to be a fully formed person. That's probably, you know, um, the biggest ad that I can say, and I would want to plug some things to have people go and check those out because when we think about uh, alignment. My personal memoir, A Son's Reckoning with Family, was really what that was. Alignment was what that was focused on, and I think a lot of our people out there who are listening and watching to the show, when they think of alignment, they look at that as, am I perfect?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and alignment is not perfection. It's your personal integrity, your personal compass under pressure.
Yes.
And those are the kinds of things that we work to hopefully try to find balance in. So, along with being a published author, a lot of my work in the community and in our schools has really been about helping not just our adult community understand that, but helping our young community understand this, and how
Okay.
and how being in alignment and being balanced within yourself can actually improve your life's outcomes. So that's the one other thing I would like to probably add to that wonderful introduction you made. There really isn't much more I can say about myself other than that. So um, I really want to focus on our audience and helping them understand how being proactive and addressing this part of who you are is very beneficial.
And we're
Physical and
definitely,
mental.
we have some amazing questions that we'll walk through. Before I want to do that, if for anyone that's on the live currently, because from my end, I just want to make sure that we're not having any technical difficulties. I see Dr. Carl frozen. If you do, just give me a thumbs up, because if that's the case, I'm going to bring him out and then bring him back in. I just want, and do I seem frozen to you, Dr. Carl? Oh no, okay, there you go. Okay, so now
No, you're
okay, never mind. It worked on now. All right, cool. Awesome. Okay, so our first conversation in question is, when you think about alignment, both personally and professionally, what does that actually look like in real life beyond just being the word alignment?
in real life, I think where we seek that, or where we start to recognize it, I think it happens usually within the bounds of a rupture in our lives, something happening, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's personally, whether it's professionally. Um, there's usually a break. There's usually uh, something that happens within our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it can lead to fractures in who we are. It can lead to fractures in trust, into feelings of belonging, trauma,
Yeah,
especially when these things are inherited or sustained across generations. It can disorient us, you know, and it teaches us survival before it teaches us stability.
that's good. That is good. So when you say it teaches us survival first, can you expand upon that for me?
You know, think about culturally, especially how our community moves. You know, we're not we're not taught to present weakness. We're not taught to present vulnerability. We're taught to
Mm-hmm.
project strength, even
Yeah.
to our own detriment.
Yeah.
You know, and because we can't show these things to the world just because of our lived experiences, we just can't do it. So
Yeah.
what do? We hold on to it. We repress it inside of ourselves, and we focus on what we need to do.
That is true. That is
How to
true.
get from Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday to Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, repeat.
And
And
so, do you think that shows up in our effectiveness to one lead, whether it is in our personal lives or professionally?
it shows up in every facet of our lives because it's going to impact all of those things at some point. You
Okay.
may think you're playing the game well enough and you're presenting well enough that it's not having an impact because you're not dialed into the impact. You're only dialed into survival. So
Yeah.
you're not
Yeah.
seeing everything outside of the peripheral of your life that's happening. You're not even in tune to it like that. You
And
know,
it's interesting too that you say that, because this conversation of survival has been a constant conversation. I can't, and honestly, I can't wait to get back to cultural or healing conversations, to be able to really dissect those even the more, because we don't realize that what we saw or what people have seen in the misalignment of their lives has just been them trying to survive the things that their environment has tossed them in, or they've interjected themselves in. Which kind of brings me to this question: how does misalignment show up in daily day lives? Even when people think they're functioning well, what is some ways that we can know that um, you have some misalignment going on here, but because you've normalized it, this is where we are.
How can we identify it? Where does it show up? We could see it showing up in the way we go about our work, in the way we interact with others, in our professional settings. We could see it happen in the way we handle and those who we socialize with on a day-to-day basis, and what our interpersonal relationships look like. You
Yeah.
know, are they healthy? Are they
Mm,
positive?
that is good.
Are these relationships something that are these relationships something that's giving you value?
Ooh,
You know, and if we're misaligned, we could be giving too much into these kinds of things. We can be feeding into things that are toxic, things that are not healthy for us emotionally, physically, all of these kinds of things. So it can show up in the way we interact with family, you know,
mm-hmm.
the people closest to us, you know. And then when we go into our other interpersonal, whether they're romantic relationships, all of these kinds of things, you know, it touches all of that. You know,
Mm,
you may think you're communicating in one way because of how you've trained your mind and we've normalized certain things, and you can't see how it's being received on the other side. You know,
that is true.
and a lot of times we can't even feel, or we're not even in tuned enough to, or self-aware enough of our own energy
That is true. That is
that
very
we're
true.
bringing in, that we wake up every day, that we walk out the door every day with when we going into our things. So when we're out in front of people, we're not even cognizant enough of how we're being received and what we're giving off into our worlds, because we're only focused on presentation and getting through, you know.
That's it.
And so it sometimes it could just allow us to not be as present in our lives as we should be,
Mm,
and we're taking L's in areas of our lives where we shouldn't be taking L's, you know, and
that's
you know,
true.
and the only way that we can recognize that is to be able to give ourselves grace and take a step back and really do some deep diving work and looking at ourselves and saying, "Hey, I need to take back. I need to take a breath and look at what's happening around me right now. You know, how do I feel?
Mm-hmm.
You know, physically, how do I feel mentally? Something you're going to identify something that's not right. You're going
Yes.
to identify something that you feel that you need to address. And this is that first stage of being self-aware within your who you are, to recognize that, hey, you know, I don't need to crash out
Every time. Mm-hmm.
every time in order to know that something's wrong.
Right.
And that's what we do. We crash out, and then that's when we take stock. But part of being in alignment is being proactive in those things, so that we're protecting ourselves and we're giving ourselves the tools that we need so that we don't crash out.
That's
You know,
it.
and
That's true. Especially
that's part of that alignment process of being able to find that balance and looking at where you are and really reading the room. And a lot of times, I don't think as individuals we're really reading our own rooms the way we should be.
and I agree with that. I think we don't, especially when it concerns us personally, because we've normalized so many things in our
Mhm.
life. We grew up in environments and we saw the things that we saw when we grew up, and at some point took weight of those things as this is how life should be or is, or
Mhm.
this is what I should expect based on or hope for based upon
Yeah.
the environments in which I came from. So taking that stock, and I think about it from the perspective of you go to a you've been there for 30 years and you get there and all of a sudden you got 30 years in, they decide to promote you to a leadership position. Now you're above people, but because you've never really dealt with work of your own self, you lead them out of your own traumas. And
Exactly.
because you're not well enough to feed that trauma, how do you coach and develop someone that you can't even deal with the inner you with, but you know your job? And I think that's why we created the move, because occupations are going way more beyond I'm just the sole person that comes to a job on an everyday basis.
Mhm.
And as much as we used to joke back in the day, but you are you are your team's therapist, you are that individual's confidant or whatever they may need to feel successful to be able to work with you. But we are so far removed from that now because people are still stuck on their own stuff that you're losing good people where people are not showing up like they used to for themselves, so it just makes everything a downward spiral of something. And so it kind of brings me to my next point is that we begin to overlook the subtle signs of things. You crashing out. That may not be subtle, but
Hmm.
that's a sign that something internally is off. And if you're looking to build better for your future, for yourself, just for your household, because I know we're talking about it from also healing and learning and leadership perspective, but people are leaders of their home. And it's interesting because I went to a live podcast yesterday, and we were just talking about leadership from the perspective of husband and wife and male, and male and female. And I think that was one of the conversations I would have brought to the table is like, have we self-checked first before we even talk about leadership? Because how can you go into a leadership perspective not knowing your strengths and your weaknesses? What are you strong at? What are you weak at? What are you still dealing with that's trauma related? But no one talks about those things. And getting into trauma, how does unaddressed trauma or emotional weight show up in decision making, communication, even in leadership? How have you seen that show up with some of the clients that you've worked with?
Well, first thing I think a lot of our listeners and watchers need to understand is first understand that trauma informed leadership demands that you lead from awareness and not avoidance.
Mm,
You know, trauma informed leadership asks us to recognize how pain shapes perception, how fear influences decision making, and how healing restores clarity.
oh,
So
that is
when,
good.
so when leaders do a reckoning of their own within themselves, when they confront their silences, their shame, and the inherited narratives that may have shaped them, they can then create a space for others to do the same. You know,
Mm,
and that's how alignment moves from personal to the collective.
okay. Okay. And so let's take somebody who's high functioning. I love what you just said there because you gave us some good nuggets, and I'm going to go back and listen to the live to write those down and share that out. But take someone who's high functioning and on the outside, everything always quote unquote seems fine. How would you address, or how is that even, how can you tell the unaddressed traumas even in someone who's seemingly looks like they have it all together?
Let me see if I can understand the question.
So, because you have like those high functioning individuals that, every you look at them, it looks picture perfect, but you've watched their leadership, you've watched them move in society, you watched them deal with people, yet they're seemingly seem fine. Ultimately, may have some unaddressed things because it's showing up in their work, it's showing up in how they move. But
Mhm.
when you can't tell them that they're not because they feel like everything in their world is great. So how do you handle people who are like that?
And I think in a circumstance like the one you just explained, this is where the collective has to probably look at their own individual relationships with this particular leader,
Mm,
you know, and come to some awareness of their own individual leadership style.
mm,
Everyone's not treated the same,
of course,
right?
of
You know,
course.
so every member of the collective may have a different individual relationship with whoever this leader is.
Mm-hmm.
You may be better to some instead of others. You know,
That is
do you
true.
have the relationship with this leader where they have a policy where they want you to come and communicate with them?
That is
That
true.
tells you a great deal. Or are they a leader that's in their office with the door closed and they don't want to be disturbed?
I
You
think
know?
that's where a lot of leadership is going. You're in your office with the door closed because
Hmm.
I don't want to deal with your traumas and mine too, and especially now and what I'm seeing, so many retention is at a very rocky place right now.
Hmm.
And it first starts with the individual because nothing can happen, even in leadership, in all things, until we deal with the person. And that's the person on the team side and the person on the individual side. When you start to deal with what makes you not show up for your leadership, because that's another thing too. It could be you're beefing with the leader because you don't know how to respond to structure,
Hmm.
or it could be the leader's big ploy for wanting control. So now they're controlling and trying to make it seem show you that they're ruling from the ironclad thump this like they're that type of leadership. But then all of it based upon trauma, what does it look like for a leader to create alignment within his team? So, without being on the burnout, because I think dealing with individuals, you said something there, dealing with the individuals and how they need to be dealt with, but you're trying to bring order to your team.
Mhm.
How does a leader bring that alignment into the team without burning themselves out doing it?
And I think this is where, you know, we have to go. We have to also understand where our new leaders are generating from.
Mm, that's
You know,
good.
the environment and the amount of social interaction is not what it was 30 years ago.
Mm,
You know, because of the internet, because of social media, because of technology. A lot of people may have proficient technical business sense,
hmm
um, or a certain intellectual capacity, but that doesn't make them a leader.
mm,
You
yes.
know, that
Say that
doesn't make them, that doesn't give them the tools they need to socially interact with other people in an effective way.
hmm
You know, and I think a lot of times that gets misconstrued, where you put people in leadership positions who really don't have foundational people skills, first of all, or even their own social maturity for how they do engage with other people.
Yeah.
So if they're trying to lead with them with the rod instead of the carrot, you know, you have to understand why they're doing that. And usually if that's being done, it's being done because that individual knows there are certain tools that they don't have.
hmm
And a lot of times you get elevated to a position of leadership. You think you're more prepared. You think you understand what being a leader is, but then you don't know until you're in circumstances where you have to lead a group of 25 to 30 different personalities with different life experiences and different backgrounds and social economic status and all of these kinds of things.
So do
You
you
know,
think that as a when we start to move into leadership, would you say that companies should go back to that basics of just
most
helping them
definitely.
begin to understand how to deal with multiple backgrounds
You're
of
starting to see that type of intervention happen in certain environments where they're really taking stock of who are in leadership positions when you're dealing with people, you
mm,
know, and organizations and leaders and CEOs and company heads and project managers there. I think they are really looking at, first of all, how is this impacting the entity? How is it impacting productivity? How is it impacting the lives of people that we entrust to do the work that we need to do for them?
hmm
And how is this impacting outcomes? You're seeing more and more individuals and especially young professionals now completely walking away from professions. And they're
oh my
not doing
God.
that because they don't like the job. They're doing that because they don't like the environment that they're working in.
Oh my God. So you
And
just go,
you have
you're
people
speaking my
completely
language.
walking away from careers altogether
Yeah.
and going into other areas of life because they're leaving environments that are not emotionally and not healthy for them to be in. And you're seeing that more and more with this generation of workers and these new millennials where they're not accepting that, hey, I need to be in this place for 30 years because I need to be there for 30 years. They're
Yeah.
now coming into work really being a little bit more self-aware and self-informed within themselves to know that, hey, this isn't the right place for me. So I'm out.
I just
I'm
had that
in there.
conversation.
And now instead of chasing money and chasing opportunities, they're chasing environments and they're chasing cultures.
Ah,
You know,
speak.
and I can say that wholeheartedly because I'm in that same situation. That's what I'm interested in. It's not about, I want to know when I come to work, what is this culture?
So, what do you think leaders are doing wrong when they're trying to quote unquote fix culture?
You know, they're not coming to the collective. They're not
Mm,
communicating with the collective. They may be trying to fix the culture, with their particular vision of what they think the culture should be or what they think the culture is. They're not asking what can make the culture better. They're not asking what the actual collective is needing in order to be their best selves, to be authentic at work. I mean, I'm sure you know plenty of people who don't show up at work authentically.
Very much so. I literally was just having this conversation, literally, about the generations we're seeing now as concerns work. They honestly want to know that I feel appreciated in what I'm doing. And if I don't feel or sense that appreciation, I'm going to find something or I'm going to look for a place that I can have this appreciation. And
Mhm.
it's like I see it personally, right? Even in my industry, I've seen it. Whereas these people have come into work and get there, and the level of care, concern, and attention. Not saying that you're hand holding, but you're invested in what they're invested in, and you give opportunities for growth, and they feel like they have an advancement possibility with the company and things of that nature. Then yeah, they're holding on to that because okay, that's great. But I've seen some walk away that said, I would take a job, less money,
Mm-hmm.
for the safety of the fact that they want to know what I want to do to grow.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know how to push me forward in growth.
Mm-hmm.
And these conversations, and that's another part of the move that we haven't even tapped into because I want those to be more in person, but the cultural conversations, because now it's not just the fact that of the generation, it's also the fact that the cultures that are coming in. We're in a melting pot society more and more on a daily basis. And we, because of our own traditions and thought processes when it concerns leading people, we expect that everybody's going to be just like us.
Mm-hmm.
Their ways are going to be like our ways. They're going to move like I want to win. When there's other ethnicities and other cultures who have different types of traditions and ways that they move and believe, and we don't make it comfortable for them to operate in them themselves.
Mm-hmm.
My boss told me when I first came into management a long time ago, he said, if you scratch their back, they'll scratch yours. But that meant to
Mm-hmm.
me, I watched him and I watched how he would sit down and just have general conversations with people on my team. And I watched him be invested in people's kids and he had them hanging up on his cubicle. And I watched how everyone always loved showing up.
Mm-hmm.
We've far removed ourselves from that place. And now I'm seeing that the burnouts are on an all time high. Like you said, I don't have to stay 30 years in a job anymore. That's what mom and daddy did because
Mm-hmm.
they felt they needed to do, even
They had to.
suppressing some of their
Yeah.
thought processes, suppressing the way they felt about things. They just saw the job. It wasn't about I had options.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that is a big thing with us now, culturally speaking. And we have to come back and talk about that from a culture's perspective. Culturally
Mm-hmm.
speaking, you're losing people.
Yeah.
You're paying for it, and now this is an expense because you pay to train these people,
Yes.
you paid them to come in, and now they're leaving you. And now you have to go pay someone else to be trained to take
Mm-hmm.
the position that you paid someone else for. So it's just the continual domino effect of things. And so that kind of brings me to my next question and wanting to make this actionable. Can you give me like two or three practical ways that someone can begin realigning themselves, even if it's something small that they can do this week? And not just thinking from a leadership perspective, but just an overall person becoming a person who's building. What are like two to three practical ways that someone can begin to realign themselves?
I think the first is probably the most hardest to do, and that is acknowledge
Mm, mm,
ourselves, acknowledging that we may not be prepared, or there are certain tools that we lack. This idea that we got to fake it till we make it, a lot of that's to our detriment.
yes, it is.
You know, um, so I think it first starts with each individual acknowledging within themselves and confronting within themselves the areas in which they may be lacking certain things. You know, so you know, leaders have to do this reckoning within themselves, where they have to really do some deep diving and do some deep reflecting and ask themselves certain questions about themselves and how that may be presented in how they're interacting with other people in their professional capacity, in their personal capacity. So that
Mhm.
means you have to be able to confront certain silences. You have to be able to acknowledge certain areas of your life. You have to be able to, acknowledge some of the inherited narratives that may have shaped who you are,
Right.
because when you can do those things and you're now doing the work, now you can actually create a space for others to do that same thing also. And that's how alignment moves from the personal to the collective.
Okay.
Because leadership is about what? It's we, it's not me, right?
That's
So
correct.
to be a leader, you have to recognize it's not about the personal, it's about the collective. So how can I create space for my collective? That means I got to own certain things. I have to be vulnerable. I have to allow myself to listen
Yes.
sometimes and not lead. I need to create space to deal with um, others who are unlike myself. I have to be able to recognize that, first of all, I'm in a position of power.
Yeah.
That there tilts the alignment,
Mm.
especially when you're dealing with people who work underneath you. So right there, you have a power dynamic. You know how and people will say sometimes there's no way to really remove that. There may not be a way to remove it, but there's a way to make it less threatening.
Okay. Okay.
You know, so that you can actually be open to communicating and then having others communicate with you. But where does that start? Who's in control of that? Is that the organization or is
Right.
that you?
It's you. Yeah.
So as a leader, that means you have to first be honest from within.
That's right.
You know, and leadership is really about truth telling, and it's about having
Woo.
emotional courage. First of all, to understand what's lacking, and then to reimagine the system and to be able to rebuild trust and redefine what being in a position of leadership and power means.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about trauma, especially if you're talking about it from a cultural perspective, you know
Mm-hmm.
um, alignment is the bridge between trauma and transformation.
Yeah.
You
That is so true. That's it.
know, and
Alignment is the bridge. Yes, it is.
it's because it's where healing actually becomes a strategy,
Ooh.
and your leadership actually develops out of being what? Authentically who you are.
Yes. Yes. Oh my God. That right there should have take us home for everybody to like that piece that you just said is the epitome of things. That bridge between healing and really coming into your alignment, right?
Hmm.
Like it starts inward. It starts with you. Like it literally does. And you have to sit with yourself and deal with those things because then if you're not, I just lead from my trauma. I lead from things that broke me. So now I'm teaching you and telling you and trying to quote unquote develop you based off of my limitations.
Hmm.
And it's just like, when are we going to realize that this bridge is so easy to cross? But you
Hmm.
just have to be honest. You have to come into the. We talked about that earlier this year. On another section we had was about being our authentic selves, like showing up authentically in all that we do. But you can't do that until you deal with you. And so, just as your professional opinion, right? Do you think, and this is something that I've been tossing around, that some organizations should have mental health professionals on site at their company?
I think the the leaders who have done this kind of work,
Mm-hmm.
who've done this kind of self-reflection, who have and are they're now creating environments and creating systems and creating structures, are actually creating that within their organizations. Spaces where their employees can be supported
Mm-hmm.
because they recognize that how they show up is directly related to how they feel.
And how they perform.
So if I need to invest in a resource in my organization that can keep my people feeling optimal, that's a worthwhile investment.
Yeah.
And have them continue to feel optimal while they are in the workplace.
Yes.
And I can give you a great example of that. Part of my work is as a school-based mental health therapist. And I work in a culturally specific program called Kofi Services, where I only work specifically with our young Black boys and girls.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's the only population I serve, 6th through 8th grade. I have
Okay.
20 young people that I see in school with a wait list, people of kids trying to get in to meet with me, and families
Oh.
they want to see their children supported. Why did the school make that investment in having me there?
Mm-hmm.
Because my physical presence in the space alone makes a difference to these young boys and girls when they see me every day.
That's good.
They're in an environment where they don't have access to Black teachers. You know, the leadership, everything that they see does not reflect them. They're
Wow.
carrying they're carrying they're carrying trauma into the school into their school environment. They're carrying dysfunction. They're carrying all kinds of pain. They're
Mm-hmm.
carrying hurt. And so where are their outcomes showing in this environment where the people who are in charge, the leaders, don't reflect who they are.
Mm.
So do you see how there can be a disconnect?
Yeah, very much so.
Especially in how our young people are perceived and how they are engaged with by these groups
Correct.
of people.
Correct.
So having me there takes the onus off of them to have to even be culturally responsive because they have someone there for these
Yeah,
young
who works in that? Yeah.
so they can come and get their needs met meeting with me, not just once a week or once every 2 weeks like a private clinical based setting, but my kids see me 5 days a week. I'm in the building. They see me standing in the hallway during class transition times. And who do they gravitate to? Me, the one person who sees them and views them and interacts with them differently.
Yes.
So they may get triggered by the white assistant principal that comes down there yelling at them to go to class and to not be in the hallways because of the sound of his voice. But they'll come to me and I can tell them, hey, where are you supposed to be right now? And I can communicate with them in a different tone of voice with a totally different energy. And they'll look at me, I was like, I'm on my way to class, Dr. Carl. I'm like, okay, let's go to class. Totally
Yes.
different interaction.
Yes. Very much so.
And that's having my physical presence in the room where I can actually help them improve their outcomes and keep them in an educational environment at the same time.
But that school noticed the weakness.
Noticed what they didn't have and noticed the need that needed to be met.
Correct. And honestly, Dr. Carl, that's why I created the Move, because so many organizations are centered around business, 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 but to run the business, you need the people.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have a person who has that tone of voice or can talk you through whatever the situation is to make you want to come to work again. I've heard it before, like, oh my God, you checked on me yesterday, and because you checked on me today, I was able to come back to work today because I was feeling down yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't realize how those culture responsive conversations, or just the difference in how people are handled. If I handle you like I care for you, you respond to that handling. And then you want to put more out. So, and it was like me, and I can understand, like, even in situations that as a young kid myself, when I was young, I don't respond to yelling. So if you yelling at me, my response is to not do what you say.
Yeah.
But if you have a conversation with me, or you came and you explained things to me, because I was one of those why kids. I don't know about anybody else that's watching today, but I was a why kid. You have to tell me why, because I don't know why to everything that I am doing. But if you explain it to me, and even in the different settings that I've matriculated through life, I've realized that it's really how if you show up for me, I'll show up for you. And that's so great that you talked about that and shared that with me, because it goes to my next question. Here at the Move Collective, we talk about whole person alignment. How does a culturally responsive whole person approach change outcomes? And I think that you just shared was a prime example for that.
Yeah.
This school saw the need. It was a cultural transformative need that brought you in and said, no, you're not going to be for everybody.
Yep.
But this is for who you are for. And in that, that makes the transition with
Mm-hmm.
the students now say, well, I have a support system. I have someone who's going to fight for me.
Mm-hmm.
I have someone who looks like me that can understand me. And then more importantly, I feel like I now have a confidant. That if that is not more culturally responsive, I don't know what it is. But
Yeah.
it's a perfect example. And I believe, like you said, but it takes this is my only grievance with the leadership situation. Most leaders in most hierarchy companies, um, they have been in their seat for 30 some years. And so much so they're basically rooted in how they want to move and run things. That's rooted. How do you break up that type of monotony to now come into a place where it's like the old you can't teach an old dog new trick situation, but they've been doing this for 30 years, and now I have to run this team where you have younger generational people and they're leaving. How would you address something like that?
I think one of the things that you're seeing, and I think, and it's happening in the most progressive of organizations, where leaders have really done this kind of work. They've invested in doing this kind of work where they've been able to recognize what their most valuable resource is. I do consulting and I do trainings with mental health teams, and I talk to leadership and I tell them the most important resource you have is your people, especially when you're providing mental. You need to be able to invest in them.
Yeah.
In the private sector, you're starting to see bits and pieces of this. Imagine working in an organization where your entire livelihood is based on the production of people. If you were a day trader on Wall Street or out in Silicon Valley and you're a venture capitalist and you're investing in and you're buying stocks and you're doing things like this, and you need human capital to do that. That
Yes.
means you need to have this group of people dialed in emotionally, physically, everything, so that they can give you what they can of themselves to get the job done, right?
Correct.
These
Correct.
types of organizations are recognizing the importance of mental health. They're
Mhm.
starting to recognize that. They're starting to invest in having that on staff mental health professional there so that they can address their needs of their people who he might have had a strong first quarter performance where he was rocking
Yeah.
and he was ticking all the boxes. He was making a lot of money for the organization, but then something may have happened in that individual's life. In quarter two, that productivity took like a 30 or 40% dip. And
Mhm.
then leadership is like, what happened? Mark was crushing it. What happened? This doesn't just happen. He was one of my top performers. Something is going on with him. So now they got a resource for Mark in-house where he can go and meet with someone and Mark can sit and say, hey, I'm going through a divorce right now.
Yeah.
She wants to take the kids. Um, it's impacting me. I don't know what to do. I don't know, I'm not sleeping at night. I'm angst ridden. Yeah, it's impacting my work. So now I can have these people are investing in people who can help him with that while he's at work, where he can go in and sit with a professional and talk about
It is.
how he's feeling and talk about how this is impacting his work and get some clarity, gain some alignment and some understanding and recognize what he's in control of and get him dialed back in
Yeah.
so that he can go back out and perform. The
Yeah.
most progressive organizations, especially in businesses, and especially when you're dealing with high volumes and high pressure environments, they're creating this already. You
And
know,
I think it should trickle down to more because just from I I worked with some companies and some big wigs, and the people centeredness is not a focus. It's the focus is what was our numbers this year and outdoing those numbers for the next year. And I think that's why these organizations are losing the battle. And that's what we want to do at the Move. You don't have to have the language. Let us come in and help you with it. Let us come in and help you culturally and responsibly respond to your people to teach you, put
mm-hmm,
you on a trajectory of teaching you how to walk through helping your people which in the end game helps you.
Mm-hmm.
You should be focused on what it is, even the slight. There should always be some type of workshop or some type of alignment conversations
Mm-hmm.
internally. Town halls should be happening so that you can make sure that you're always benefiting your people. And I
Yeah.
think that, like you said, some companies are coming into that notion, but I really want, and that's one of the things that the Move Collective is going to do when we start hosting our summits, is that I want to bring leaders together to have these conversations. Yes, we're going to deal with the individual because the whole individual itself is where it starts. But more importantly, this is where we are wanting to join in and be. I see that we have a guest joining. I'm gonna bring her on the stage. Hi, how are you?
I am well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I see that you popped in with us. Please tell us who you are and a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am Reverend Dr. Wanda Brooks Long, and I am a minister at Turner Monumental AME Church in Wood, Georgia. That's a section of Atlanta. I'm an educator for over 44 years, and I am currently initiating my ministry called Phoenix. And I have the privilege of being the sister of the gentleman on stage.
That is amazing, amazing. So, Dr. Long, we're talking about cultural responsiveness, healing conversations, and moving into a better place of alignment as it concerns just overall leadership and being overall better for ourselves. We deal well, live well, move well, but also finding that boundary, that basis of transitioning it into our leadership. And is there anything you would like to share on this topic tonight?
When you talk about transitioning into leadership, what you're sitting in the definition of leadership? Are we talking about leadership? Are we talking about in the community?
You're
Are we talking
breaking up
about
just a little bit, Dr. Long.
leadership? Uh, when you just
Can you hear it, Carl?
The feed dropped.
Tell her to come back in. Tell her to log out and come back
Yeah.
in.
And I think Dr. Long, one of the things I think she was getting ready to go into in her conversation, especially as being a leader
Right.
in the community as a reverend, and from a theological standpoint and what that means,
Right.
especially when we're dealing with within our own community, because we know what the Black church means,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and in our community and in our lot, and how that impacts how our community moves in some capacities and our individual journeys. You know, I think this is an area where they've really been working to be very progressive in redefining what leadership looks like for the
Yeah.
next generation. You
Oh,
know,
God, I would love to
leadership.
get her. And if we can't get her on tonight, we
Yeah,
need to. We can have a segue with
yeah,
this and
yeah.
definitely bring her back and let her speak because
Oh, yeah.
I would love to hear her perspective on that. And I see that her she's dropping, but hopefully she can come back in.
Oh, yeah.
That would be great. I think I see something.
But I think one of the things I would want to add to what we were just talking about, Janay, when we were talking about
Okay, I
leadership.
think I got it. Let me see. Hold
Okay.
on, Dr. Ross. Dr. Long, do I have you? Are you back with me? Can you hear me? She's still not coming in. So
If
I'm
she's
gonna
on
kick.
I-70, if she's on I-75 in Atlanta, she probably gonna have some connectivity issues.
Yes, I'm gonna kick her. Tell her to come back. So let it come back
But
in.
one of the things I was saying, to go back to what we were talking about, a lot of times, I think in some spaces, what you're seeing is leaders are actually recognizing what they don't have, the tools that they don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of them actually investing and going out to develop those tools, especially depending on the age, the generation of that particular leader, they're now just investing in having other people come in and do that work for them.
Yeah. And,
You know,
and that's what we
I don't
want
have
to
to
do.
learn how, I don't have to be culturally responsive. I don't have to learn how to be socially adept. I'm paying somebody for that for me.
And that they can
They're
definitely
going to take on this responsibility. They're going to be the go-to for when people got an issue. I don't want them to come to me. I want to be in my office with my door closed. They can go see our work coach
Yes.
and talk through what they got to talk to. And it's worth the investment for me to do that. You know,
And Dr. Carr, you're speaking our language. And I know like I said, I've known Dr. Carr for a while now, but we have not delved in the totality of what the move wants to do. But that's exactly what we want to do. We want to be the answer. We know that you have a problem. I see it when I go to the EEOCs and I get all the discrimination cases. I see in most of all of the cases means my boss did this, my leader did that, or this is what was dealing with. So, but we want to go into these places. You don't have to have the conversation. Let me come in, spend 6 months with you to get you started on a plan, and then I'm gonna set you up on the afterwards with my accountability team. Because now, not only are we doing this work, I'm still gonna hold you accountable because this is a partnership. What we do together and what we build together in healing people, because people need the healing that they really deserve. And what we need now more than ever are these types of conversations to be able to overall build these better alignments so that people can make better decisions. Like at the Move Collective, this is the work we want to do, helping individuals and organizations literally find clarity, move with intention so they can be whole. And that's how we get back on this trajectory of overallness. We do have to wrap in like 3 minutes. So I want to give you an opportunity to share what's on your heart as we wrap up. But I also want you to tell Dr. Long that to connect her with me, because I would love to also have a conversation with her just from a different perspective and a different side of this same conversation. So the floor is yours for the next minute.
To everyone watching and everyone listening, alignment, as we mentioned earlier, starts from within. And it means, let me use an analogy. Sometimes you have to lose something in order to gain something. I call it the law of addition by subtraction. You might have to give something up of yourself. You may have to put your sword and shield down in order to gain some clarity and some peace and some forgiveness and some grace. To give yourself that. You have to allow yourself to be vulnerable so that you can do the deep dive you need to do to acknowledge where you've been. We don't have to live in that, but we can acknowledge.
Yes.
We can claim it. And then we could say, you know what? I'm now going to leave this behind, and I'm going to embrace my journey. I'm going to embrace where I've been, but now I'm going to move forward with a sense of self, a sense of awareness, a sense of peace, and a sense of what's possible.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm going to pour myself into. I'm going to leave the trauma behind. I'm going to leave the negativity behind. I'm going to leave the toxic workplace, the microaggressions. I'm going to leave all of that behind now. And I'm going to be my authentic self. I'm going to stand up straight. My shoulders are going to be back. I'm going to look people in the eye. I'm no longer going to go in spaces where I have to minimize and marginalize who I am to make other people feel comfortable around me. And I'm speaking to especially specifically within my own community, because we've had to do that to navigate our spaces, especially professionally and personally in some capacities. And we need to stop that. We need to start being our authentic selves, and we need to start standing up, and we need to start standing on that, because that's going to improve our mental health outcomes. When we're no longer having to live in the circumstances of other people, we can now define our own circumstances by our action and what we do moving forward. So that's something I would really do to the people. Claim your truth, claim who you are. Don't let that define you. Let the work that you do and what you put into the world be what defines you.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for just
My
being
pleasure.
in the
Thank you so
space
much
with
for
me
having me.
today, Dr. Carl, and for everyone who's been watching and people have been joining and popping in and out. And I see people are still coming to the studio. We are gonna wrap it, but um I love the people that you have connected to you, Dr. Carl. So let's chat offline and let's get this a
For real.
group discussion or a group
No doubt.
panel going. And so we can talk some more about these very conversations because this is what the move wants to do. But just thank you, Dr. Carl, for leading us to this
Thank
conversation
you.
today, just for your expertise and the work that you are doing into the community. Many people do not know, but this man loves working with the kids, and I love that for him. He loves seeing differences happen. He wants, like his the whole premise that he wants to increase life chances for our youth and the generations to come. So I cannot say that this is not a better person to do that work. If you knew him, knew his story, and knew his journey, please tell them how they can connect with you
Yeah.
just to know the journey that you are on now.
Please check out. And Janay was kind of humble. She didn't acknowledge that we're also doing some things. We're trying to be part of the solution for addressing uh, what our community is facing moving forward, especially in this current social political climate, and how it's going to impact our most vulnerable, meaning our youth. And so we got some great things happening. You can reach out to me, drcarlyoungphd.org. You can go in and you can see the books that I've published in the last year. It Takes a Nation of Millions to Fight the Power, volumes 1 and 2. A Son's Reckoning with Family, my own personal memoir where I talk about transgenerational trauma and identity, and you just heard from my sister, Dr. Wanda Brooks Long. I just found her a year ago, and that's a whole story in and of itself. Uh, and it's been where we talk about vulnerability and what it takes to gain pieces of who we are. Um, putting myself in a situation to find that relationship required vulnerability, but I've gained something from that. I gained a sister, uh, and so you can learn about those things on the website. You can also check out a project Miss Janae and I are going to be working that's coming very, very, very soon, Broken to Be Spoke, where we've put together a youth-based program for middle school and high school kids, a 12-week program, brokentobespoke.com. Hop on the website and check that out, and you can read about what we're going to be presenting to the community, not just here locally where we are, but nationwide. So we got some great things down the pipe.
I'm connected to some good people, and just to simply say that to know the journey that you've been on, and
Yeah,
me personally, Dr. Carl,
yeah.
I just want to tell you how proud I am of you
Thank you.
and all that you have accomplished and pushed through. Because again, please go hear his story. It's one to listen. And so I'm super proud of him. I just again want to thank him and thank you all for joining us tonight. Meet me here next month. It may be sooner than that, but meet me here next month. Maybe next month, me and Dr. Carter talk to. We can have this a panel conversation going and get it together. So I'm gonna have him connected because obviously he got some people who got some stuff they got to say. And
Yeah.
I thank you guys so much for joining. As always, make sure that you're in the line and walking in your truth. Till next time.